Welcome to the deep dive. You shared some really fascinating research with us recently about car dashboards, how they're designed. It's something we probably, don't give a huge amount of thought to day to day.
And we just use them.
Exactly. But it turns out there's a lot going on behind the scenes to make them readable, easy to use while driving.
Absolutely. A lot of human factors research.
So, for this deep dive, we're going to explore that world, specifically digital dashboards, the LCD screens you see in, well, most modern cars now.
Yeah, they're pretty much standard.
And our goal, really, is to get a handle on what makes a digital dashboard work well,
Mhm.
what makes it user-friendly, which obviously links directly to safety.
It really does. Minimizing distraction is key.
And honestly, digging into this, some of the findings were quite surprising. Like what shape people actually prefer for dials or the best spot for those little warning icons.
Precisely. The studies you sent over, they really dug into these LCD dashboards in detail.
Yeah.
They looked at the information that's always there. The resident display, as the researchers call it.
Okay, like speed and RPM.
Exactly. Your speedometer, your rev counter. And they also looked at the information that pops up temporarily.
Hmm.
Your temporary display information.
Warning lights, turn signals, that kind of thing.
That's it. And the studies were pretty rigorous, using things like eye tracking, measuring reaction times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, with a good number of people in simulated driving setups. So the conclusions, they're quite robust about how we actually see and process this information when we're driving.
Okay, great. So let's start with that resident display then. The speed, the RPM, the stuff we glance at constantly.
Right.
The research kind of grouped existing designs together first, didn't it? What were the main categories they found?
They did. They basically identified four main styles in cars, with combustion engines anyway. First one, DT1, was that classic look. Symmetrical, two round dials, digital speed, digital RPM. Pretty standard.
Okay, like a digital version of the old analog gauges.
Pretty much.
Mhm.
Then DT2. This one had the speedometer right in the middle, center stage.
Ah, okay.
And it had a slightly unusual shape, not perfectly round,
Hmm.
still digital speed, but the RPM was shown as like a progress bar indicator.
Interesting. A bar graph for RPM. Got it. So that's two. What were the others?
Okay, DT3 was symmetrical again, two gauges, but these had unconventional shapes, sort of bracket-like maybe,
Okay.
again digital speed.
Yeah.
But the RPM here used a pointer, more like an analog gauge, but still on the screen.
So unconventional shape, pointer for RPM, and the last one, TT4.
DT4, yeah.
Yeah.
Also symmetrical, two gauges, but these had a really distinct L shape.
L shape. Okay, that sounds different.
It was. Digital speed again. And the RPM display was kind of a hybrid. It showed a digital number and had a little indicator element too.
All right. So four quite different approaches to showing the same core info. So the big question then, how easy were these to actually read?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting when they measured, speed and accuracy for vehicle speed. That speedometer center design, DT2, the one with the unusual shape, that actually came out on top. Fastest to read.
Really?
Yeah.
Faster than the traditional round one.
Just slightly, yeah. DT1, the round dual dial, was a very close second, but the slowest. That was the bracket-shaped one in DT3.
Any idea why?
They thought maybe the font size was a bit smaller, maybe just more visual elements around it, making it slightly busier, a bit more cognitive load, perhaps.
Okay, so simpler and maybe front and center helps for speed. What about the RPM? That's often just a quick glance, right?
It should be, ideally.
Hmm.
And here the findings were, well, pretty clear-cut. Digital displays, like in DT1 and DT4, were significantly better,
Better how?
faster to read, and more accurate. People made way fewer mistakes compared to the indicator styles in DT2 and DT3.
Ah, so the bar graph and the pointer weren't great.
Not really, no. Participants made quite a few errors. Sometimes they were just, not very noticeable, or the scale wasn't clear, especially on the planar one. In fact, for that pointer display in DT3, they recorded glance times. Well, sometimes over 8 seconds.
8 seconds? Wow, that's huge when you're driving.
It's definitely a potential safety risk. Way too long to have your eyes off the road. That design just seemed to demand too much visual attention for RPM.
That really underscores how important this is. A design choice can have real safety consequences. So digital readouts for RPM seem like the clear winner for speed and accuracy.
Definitely seems that way based on this research.
Did they also look at just how fast people could find the info? Like not just read it, but locate it quickly.
Yeah.
Visual search, they call it.
Yes, visual search efficiency. And the trends were pretty similar to the readability results.
Okay.
For finding the speed, that DT2 design, the speedometer-centered one, again, the most efficient, quickest to locate.
Right.
And for finding the RPM, the Digital displays, DT1 and DT4, came out on top again.
So it seems like if it's easy to read, it's generally easy to find quickly, too.
Yeah, there's a strong correlation there.
Yeah.
Makes sense, really. Less visual clutter usually means faster processing all around.
So, objectively, performance-wise, some designs were clearly better. But driving isn't just about pure data processing, is it? What about how drivers actually felt about them? Did they ask about preferences?
They did, yeah. They used a standard tool, the attractive questionnaire.
Attractive?
It measures a few things. Pragmatic quality, basically. How useful is it? Does it help you do the task?
Right, usability.
Then hedonic quality. Is it stimulating,
Mm.
enjoyable, kind of the wow factor? And then just overall attractiveness. Does it look
Oh,
good?
did people like any surprises?
Big surprise, actually. The design rated most desired overall. It was the unconventional L-shaped one, DT4.
No way. The L shape. Even though it wasn't necessarily the top performer on pure speed reading.
Exactly. People described it using words like novel, spatially deep, technologically appealing. It just had a certain aesthetic appeal that resonated.
Huh. So looks and feel really mattered there. What about the others? The round one, DT1.
DT1, the round dials, that was seen as very task-oriented. Good, pragmatic quality. It does the job well, but maybe a bit boring, less exciting.
Functional but not flashy.
Pretty much. And the other unconventional ones, DT2 and DT3, they landed more in the neutral zone. Although they did note that DT3, the bracket-shaped one, might have increased the cognitive load slightly, which could explain why it wasn't a favorite.
So it's not always just about the raw performance numbers. There's a subjective experience too, but was there any link between performance and preference?
Oh, absolutely. The researchers were clear on that. Dashboards that performed better, objectively easier to read, faster to find info, generally got higher subjective ratings too.
Okay, that makes sense. If you're not fighting the display, you're going to like it more.
Precisely. A smooth, easy interaction leads to a better overall feeling about the product.
Okay, so that's the resident display covered pretty thoroughly. Let's shift gears to the temporary stuff. The warning lights, indicators, things that flash up when needed.
Right. The transient information.
The research looked at where those are placed, right? And how big they are.
Yes, exactly. They focused on position, top of the display versus bottom and size. They tested icons from 6 millimeters up to 10 millimeters.
And they use simple icons?
Yeah, just simple arrow icons. The idea was to avoid any bias from drivers already being familiar with standard warning symbols like, the oil can or check engine light. Isolate the effect of position and size.
Smart. Okay, so what did they find? Does position matter for reading these temporary icons?
It matters significantly. Icons shown at the top of the dashboard were read much faster than icons shown at the bottom.
Much faster. Wow. Regardless of size.
Pretty much, yeah. Within that 6 to 10 millimeter range they tested, top placement was consistently faster.
Okay. What about size then? Did that make a difference?
It did, but mainly for the icons at the bottom. Down there, bigger was better. Reading time decreased as the icon size increased from 6 millimeters up. They actually pinpointed 8 millimeters as kind of the optimal minimum size if you have to put icons at the bottom.
8 millimeters minimum for the bottom. Good practical guideline.
Exactly. But interestingly, for icons at the top, size didn't make a significant difference in reading time, at least not within that 6-10 millimeter range for these simple arrows.
Huh. So if it's at the top, even a slightly smaller icon is read quickly. But if it's at the bottom, it really needs to be bigger.
That seems to be the takeaway,
Okay,
yes.
that's about reading them.
Wow.
What about just noticing them in the first place? The visual search part. Did location or size affect how quickly people spotted them?
Similar trend for location. Icons at the top were found more quickly than icons at the bottom. Faster detection.
Okay, so top is better for noticing and for reading.
Correct. But here's a nuance regarding size and detection.
Yeah.
Icon size did not significantly affect how quickly people located the icon. So a big icon wasn't necessarily spotted faster than a small one initially.
Oh, that's interesting. So size doesn't help you find it faster.
Not significantly in this study, no. However, and this is important, for icons at the bottom, even though size didn't speed up finding it, a larger size did speed up understanding its meaning once it was found. The reading performance part.
Ah, I see. So a big icon at the bottom might not grab your attention any quicker, but once you do look at it, you'll figure out what it means faster than if it were small.
Exactly. It shortens that recognition time, even if the initial detection time isn't affected much by size alone.
That makes sense. You might see something light up, but if it's small and at the bottom, it takes that extra fraction of a second to process it.
Precisely.
Why do you think top placement was so consistently better, both for spotting and reading?
The researchers suggested it's likely linked to our visual field and where we typically focus when driving.
How so?
Well, while we often hear our lower visual field is good for detecting motion or objects on the ground, the dashboard itself is already in the lower part of our central vision when we're looking ahead.
Right.
So putting icons at the top of that dashboard area actually brings them closer to the center of our gaze, closer to the fovea. It requires less eye movement down.
Okay, less deviation from looking at the road.
Exactly. Icons at the bottom are further out, have greater eccentricity from the main point of focus. That likely explains the slightly longer times needed to both notice them and then process their meaning. It's a bit like reading something further out in your peripheral vision, just takes a little more effort.
That makes perfect sense from a visual processing standpoint.
Yeah.
Okay, so pulling all this together, what are the main design takeaways? If you were advising a car manufacturer based on this research, what would you tell them?
Well, there's some pretty clear guidelines here.
Yeah.
For vehicle speed, keep the speedometer design clean, simple, use a decent font size, don't make it visually noisy.
Okay, simple speedo.
For engine speed, definitely prioritize digital displays. They're faster, more accurate. Avoid those indicator types, especially if the scale isn't super clear.
Right. Avoid the 8-second glance RPM gauge.
Definitely avoid that one. And then, interestingly, consider that unconventional L-shaped dual dial design, DT4.
Because people liked it.
Yeah, it really scored well on user experience and subjective appeal. So don't be afraid to innovate aesthetically as long as the core usability is still good.
Okay. And what about those temporary icons, the warnings?
Crucial ones. Place urgent or frequently used icons at the top of the display. That's optimal for both detection and reading speed.
Top is prime real estate.
It seems so. And if, for whatever reason, you have to put some temporary icons at the bottom,
Make it bigger.
make sure they're at least 8 millimeters.
No.
That seemed to be the threshold for decent readability down there.
These are really concrete, actionable insights. It's clear that thinking carefully about this stuff isn't just about making things look cool. It genuinely impacts safety and usability.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It has significant implications for HMI human-machine interface designers in the automotive world.
So the bigger picture for the industry.
This kind of research provides a solid, data-driven foundation for creating interfaces that are safer, more intuitive. As cars get more complex, minimizing driver distraction, reducing those glance times away from the road, it becomes even more critical. This helps establish evidence-based best practices.
This has been, a really insightful deep dive. It definitely makes you look at your own dashboard differently, doesn't it? Appreciate the thought that goes into it.
It does. You start noticing these design choices everywhere.
And it makes you wonder how these principles might apply elsewhere, too, beyond cars, other screens, other information displays we use.
Very true. The fundamental principles of clear visual communication are pretty universal, I think, making information easy to see, easy to find, easy to understand quickly.
That's a great point. And it leaves us, and you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on. Cars are just getting packed with more and more tech, more information displays.
The trend is definitely towards more screens, more features.
So how will designers keep finding that balance, giving us the info we need or want without completely overloading us or distracting us from the main task of driving?
That's the ongoing challenge, isn't it? How to manage that complexity and attention.
Something to ponder. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into the nuts and bolts, or maybe the pixels and placement, of dashboard design.